Hey, good evening. Thanks for joining us on this Monday night for The Pulse, Metro Detroit's only nightly political talk show. I'm Roop Raj. We have a lot to get to on this day, so here's a look at what's coming up tonight. It's an agency meant to protect you from deceptive and unfair financial practices. We're talking with our own legal analyst, Charlie Langton, about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is currently in limbo with cuts coming by the Trump administration, and what it could mean if it totally shuts down. Plus, banning pharmaceutical ads from the airwaves. It's something Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he wanted to do when he ran for president, saying the commercials don't actually help Americans. We're hearing from a doctor here at Metro Detroit on the topic and his thoughts on RFK Jr. being in charge of the kids who fall between the cracks if the Department of Education goes away. But first tonight, peace talks resuming today between the U.S. and Russia when it comes to ending the war with Ukraine. Most of it focused on a possible naval ceasefire in the Black Sea. But while those talks were happening, around 30 people, including children, were hurt in Ukraine after a Russian attack. Russian troops launched a missile strike hitting a school and residential buildings. Now, this violence comes following overnight Russian strikes that killed 7 people. Ukrainians are insisting Russia does not want to end this fighting, saying attacks have continued on the country's energy infrastructure, even after Russian President Vladimir Putin told President Trump they would stop.
Without pressure on Russia, Moscow will continue to show contempt for real diplomacy and keep destroying lives.
I think the president's got options here to apply some real pressure to Russia to get them to comply to an unconditional ceasefire.
Now, some of that pressure he's talking about could actually be in the form of monetary pressure. You see, President Trump says he's considering a wide range of financial punishments, including sanctions, if Russia and Putin don't agree to stop this fighting. And speaking of financial penalties, we're just a little over a week away now from what the president is calling Liberation Day for the U.S., the day reciprocal tariffs will be imposed on not just our adversaries, but key trading partners, too. However, the looming tariffs may not be as far-reaching as we once thought. The White House is now focusing on what it's calling the Dirty 15, the 15% of nations with the worst trade imbalances. And China, the European Union, and Mexico are on top of that list.
Win-win. Either the trade friction that these other countries have come down and we get fair trade, and if they don't follow President Trump's lead, then he will raise the tariff wall.
But it doesn't end there. President Trump also seems to be looking for a way to punish Venezuela for not cracking down on illegal immigration. He announced he'd be placing a 25% tariff on all imports from any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela, as well as imposing new tariffs on the South American country itself. Now, that secondary tariff will be impacting China and India the most, since they're the biggest buyers of Venezuelan oil. Also today, the Justice Department facing off against lawyers for Venezuelan nationals over whether the Trump administration can actually deport immigrants alleged to be gang members using that old Alien Enemies Act. The administration used the wartime law from 1798 to deport more than 200 alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang to El Salvador. On March 15th, District Court Judge James Boasberg temporarily basically barred the deportations under that law. President Trump has since called for his impeachment, calling him a, quote, constitutional disaster. Today, Judge Boasberg ruled the deported men should have had their day in court to contest their designation as gang members. In the meantime, an appellate court that heard arguments on the use of wartime law did not issue a ruling today, but guess what? It may come in the days to come. Well, this now brings us to our illegal immigration issue. The IRS is nearing a deal tonight with the Department of Homeland Security to share limited data that could help ICE. Under the agreement, ICE may provide name and address information of those suspected of crimes to the IRS to see if it matches tax records. Now, supporters say it would basically help speed up matters with border control. But critics say, wait a minute here, a deal between the agencies could mean migrants here illegally could refuse to comply with tax laws and not pay the taxes that they owe. Well, now to this story from the IRS to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In February, the Trump administration halted the agency's work altogether. Dozens of workers fired. The agency was created after the 2008 financial crisis and remains in a type of limbo right now with its operations. So what exactly does this agency do? And more importantly, how could this impact all of us if it actually shuts down? Joining us now is our legal analyst, reporter anchor Charlie Langton. Always good to see you, Charlie. Thanks for joining us on The Pulse tonight.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you, my man.
Good to see you, yeah.
All right, let's talk about this. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I find it interesting that so many departments that exist because we're used to hearing the name. Yeah. We think it's been around forever. This has only been around since 2011 because of the 2007-2008 disaster. What does this agency do for the people on the other side of that camera?
Well, I'll be honest, I looked it up because I didn't know. I've never used it. But, I mean, a lot of people have not. Maybe because it's so new. But the bottom line here is that this is a federal agency that basically helps people when they have disputes with federal issues like mortgages, credit unions, banks, that type of thing. So you can make a claim to this particular agency, and they will investigate it for you. Like, for example, if you have an interest rate issue or a credit card issue, because those are federal issues for the most part. And so, do they do a good job? Do they get results? I mean, I guess they do. Is there a bureaucracy there, perhaps? Yes, there could very well be.
It's government, after all.
It's government, after all. So I can definitely see a partisan divide in this agency. Now, I think that President Trump wants to get rid of it. I think his argument, basically, is that it is over-bureaucratic. The regulations on companies, especially small companies, when you get a letter from the Consumer Financial Protection, oh, my gosh, you got to have a response. You got to do this. And now your whole company comes to a halt because you maybe have one rogue employee perhaps that is making a claim. And I understand that. But we have that in unemployment claims. We have that in a lot of other issues there.
But let's talk for a moment about what's happened already under this bureau, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We know that Wells Fargo had a major lawsuit against it. We know that even right here at home, there have been allegations against mortgage companies that are based out of Detroit. Bottom line right now, there are so many people saying, look, if this bureau is removed, more customers will be harmed, and companies could break the law more. Do you think that's true? Is this a guardrail that needs to be there, according to the government?
I actually, in balance, I think this is a company that does need to be there. This is an issue, part of the government that does need to be there. You know, can it be modified? Perhaps it can be. But I do think this one has to be there. Why? Is because I know Dana Nessel's been very critical of this, but she's a state issue. So a mortgage and credit union and banks, those are all usually federal issues. And Dana Nessel probably doesn't want to get all the bombardment of an issue that she probably doesn't have the authority to regulate. Now, does she not have the authority? You know, again, there's some issues there. That's through the jurisdiction amount. Unless you're going to allow states to start investigating federal issues, then I think that that's a problem. I think this is an agency that we need. It should probably stay around.
I love the way you brought that up, because that segues into my next question here. Is you're saying there's a federal issue, then there's a state issue. But here you have a president that's really going to extreme measures with DOJ to do a lot of work that has been unprecedented. So right now there are 23 attorneys general across the country that are pushing back against the Trump administration. How much power does a state have to stop a president from doing what he wants to do?
Well, but who are these? These are state attorney generals.
That's right.
They don't want to be bothered with all the claims because they're saying, go call to the Federal Financial Protection Bureau. We can't do anything. These states don't have the authority. If you want to dispute your mortgage, your credit card, that's federal too. How do you do it? You don't call Dana Nessel, you call this agency. And if this agency's not around, you're going to be calling Dana Nessel more and more and more. She doesn't want it. So there's some motivation
But
there.
Specifically, I understand what you're saying. Like, obviously, Dana Nessel, the Attorney General, doesn't want to have to take a federal bureau and have to institute
But I think she's right, though. But I think she's right, though.
But how much power do attorneys general have across the country to push back against what the feds are doing in Washington?
Not much. I don't know much. And how many?
They can sue, right? They can push back by suing.
You can always sue. We see the power of judges these days. Yeah. Judges are making laws. I think judges, that's President Trump's argument, is that a whole judge can take with one stroke of the pen, can undo foreign policy to some extent, or immigration policy, or whatever. DOJ is a very powerful department. But the bottom line here, listen, if 23 attorneys general decide to do something, yeah, there's some power there. But again, we have a president that wants to eliminate waste. The president perceives this agency is wasteful, over-bureaucratic, etc. I think it's going to be cut. I think we're going to have to live with it. Should there be some agency where the consumers can complain about federal issues? Yes. And if this goes away, that's not good.
All right. Let me ask you one last question about Elon Musk. He obviously has a lot of business interests, including his social media platform, X. And there's a part of X that he's trying to grow that would actually be overseen by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And yet he's the one saying, hey, let's go cut that. Is that, how much of a conflict of interest is that? And does that even matter these days?
I don't know of anybody that wants more oversight over their own business. Nobody wants that. No one wants that. If he doesn't have any government oversight, better for him. How much of a conflict of interest? There's a lot of conflicts of interest there when you've got someone that owns a big company and subject to government regulation. There's got to be and you can't have a wall. He should not be doing that.
We should just, in the interest of fairness, point out that Democratic presidents in the past have also had what they called special government employees. Huma Abedin was a special government employee under Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State. SGEs have been around for a long time, and many of them do have business interests and have had business interests. So
doesn't mean it's right.
Doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean it's right. It's happened before. This is not the first time we've seen this movie. Definitely, this is the blockbuster that everyone seems to be tuning into. Charlie Langton.
There we go.
Legal analyst.
All the best.
Anchor, good to see you. Thank you. Still ahead, it's one thing Health Secretary RFK Jr. has said is a priority for him, doing away with pharmaceutical ads we see on TV. It's an uphill battle. But guess what? The question is, how harmful are they? We're hearing from Dr. El-Sayed of the Wayne County Health Department on the impact it could have. Welcome back to The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. This next topic involves all three of those topics, including people that are babies. We're going to talk about baby formula in a second here. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ran on this, saying he wanted to ban those pharmaceutical ads that we see on TV here in the U.S. While many politicians and media personalities were kind of punked today by a false headline saying he was directing plans to ban the ads, he has spoken in favor of this in the past. In fact, he kind of ran on that platform when he was running for president. Joining us now from a health standpoint to talk about this, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed from the Wayne County Health Department. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Always a privilege.
So let's talk about this for a moment. This, of course, as we say, there is no such thing that is happening because RFK Jr. is a powerful man in his position, but he cannot just direct the banning of ads like this. There's a lot of other considerations, but it's something he believes in. You do see eye to eye with him on this.
Yeah,
Why?
there are not many things that I would categorically agree with RFK Jr. on. This is one of them. Pharmaceutical ads, they encompass something like 35 to 40% of most pharmaceutical corporations' budgets. So when we think of what we want pharma to be doing, researching and developing new medications, that's not usually what they do. Actually, most of the basic science happens out of the NIH, which is a whole different question. That said, when you're spending 40% on glossy advertising, you got to ask why. And this doesn't usually improve the quality of healthcare. What it does is it gets people to ask their doctors questions. Now, the way medicine is supposed to work is you go to your doctor, they take a full history and physical, they run some tests, and they tell you what you need, rather than you walking in and saying, I think I got those symptoms, I think I need that drug. And we know that generics work as well, they're not as expensive, so these ads really don't serve a purpose except for lining pharmaceutical pockets.
And you know, it's interesting because New Zealand and America are the only two countries in the world that actually permit this kind of pharmaceutical advertising direct to the consumer on television. Is that a little odd to you? That surprised me.
It is a little odd. Usually when we think of New Zealand and healthcare, they do a lot better on a number of different things. It's interesting that this is one. That said, it's not odd to me that in the United States we spend this much on pharmaceutical advertising. Unfortunately, pharma is a huge sector of our economy, and in the way that they throw their weight around when it comes to our public policy, they usually tend to get their way. Over the past 20 years, when you look at spending on lobbying by sector, pharma spent $4.2 billion, that's with a B, dollars over the past 20 years. That is the #1 lobbyist by sector, which is why it is so hard to dislodge them when it comes to the power they have.
And there's so much constitutionality around expression and about consumer advertising and all kinds of things that would prevent RFK Jr. from getting his wish. And albeit today, so many people on social media saw it, thought it was real, and it wasn't. But we should point out what is real is RFK Jr. getting the keys if this happens, or the Department of Education gets disbanded. Everyone said, what do we do with young people with special needs? And they said, and the president said, we'll just hand over to the Health and Human Services and let RFK Jr. handle that. What would that look like to you?
So we're talking about the most vulnerable people in our whole society, children with special needs. And without thinking through how this is all going to work, they are trying to destroy the Department of Education. And then they're like, oh yeah, there's some important things that happen there. Maybe we'll just throw it to RFK Jr. Meanwhile, right, DOJ is also doing all of its cuts in that department. So when you're now asking that entire department to run on a shoelace budget and then throwing this really critical multi-billion-dollar set of functions over the next several years, for the next 4 years of this administration, you got to wonder how serious they are about taking care of kids with special needs in the first place. So moving bureaucracy is not as easy as building blocks like Legos. You're talking about huge swaths of critical funding for people that you just can't play fast and loose with.
But Doctor, what about the fact that before 1980, there was no Department of Education and states were responsible for taking care of young people? Wouldn't we just return to a model where we did hand over the keys to somebody else to help with those young people?
So I'll be clear. Already as it is, the state usually funds about 90% of education.
Right.
But there's a reason they built a Department of Education. You got to ask yourself, in our society, do we want more education or less education? Do we want to go back to 1980, or we would like to move forward where we're investing in the newest, latest, and greatest skills for our young people? So this idea that we've done it like that in the past, that to me doesn't really carry that much muster. Now, one of the things that we do understand, right, and this is something that RFK Jr. has wrongly attributed to vaccines, we have more autism on the rise. We have more children with special needs. You would think you would want to invest in making sure that they have the care they need rather than destroy the piece of administration that takes care of them and then toss it over to somebody else and say, yeah, you handle this.
I want to talk to you about one last thing here, because there are so many people who are concerned about the baby formulas and what's in it. It's one of the most highly regulated products that's out there, and for good reason, because we're talking about our babies. RFK Jr., are you on board with what he's saying we need to be a little more strict, a little more stringent about what's in that?
I'm all for better testing of baby formula. Like you said, we got to make sure that what we're feeding our babies is what it says on the bottle.
Sure.
But the biggest challenge with baby formula isn't actually what's contaminating it. It's that we have so few companies that actually manufacture it that if one of them goes down, that you then have a baby formula shortage, which is exactly what happened just
in
a few years
Michigan.
Exactly. Just a few years ago. So my worry is that, usually conservatives talk against regulation because they're worried about what it'll do. My point here is, okay, fine. Let us make sure that we're testing this as much as we can. I'd also, though, if we're serious about solving the challenges with baby formula, I'd also like to see the federal government try and open up the aperture to make sure more entrants can jump in, so we're not so beholden to just one or two corporations that then if you have an issue with one of their manufacturing facilities, that all of a sudden there's a shortage of baby formula.
Do you think that there are lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans right now, who have the ear of RFK Jr., who can help maybe propose some of these ideas that you're talking about?
I hope so. I certainly do. I will say he is, the word we use is heterodox, but he sometimes thinks in ways that are not consistent with what the best science is. I really do hope that now he's leading this Department of Health and Human Services, that he's in a position to take the best advice he can get. I will say I'm a little bit worried when it comes to things like his messaging on measles and the measles vaccine, which we know is super safe and very effective to prevent outbreaks, that he may not be, but I really hope that there are.
But we know that he has, since getting this job, changed his tone a little bit when it comes to measles and even the vaccines, encouraging people to get them in certain sectors where there are outbreaks. So that's good news, right?
That is good news, and he has a bit. At the same time, though, it's like he can't shake that bad habit of trying to talk about like free choice. Yes, it's your choice to vaccinate your kid, but it's a good choice. You should take it. That's what you would want the most powerful health official in the country to be saying.
Well, it's an interesting time in our country, and one that the intersection of everything, morality and medicine and people, as everything is kind of reorganized and blown up in a sense, all of this is coming to light, and we thank you for your perspective here tonight. Thanks for your time.
I appreciate you covering this, and you always highlight the most important issues, so thank you.
Thank you for coming to help us do that, Dr. El-Sayed. Still ahead tonight, a Texas congresswoman under fire for remarks made about Tesla's Elon Musk. The statement she made that now has the U.S. Attorney General telling her to, quote, tread very carefully. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2.
If you want people to take the train, take transit, then make it safe, make it clean, make it beautiful, make it wonderful. Don't make it which is what she's done.
A lot of news to cover while you were away on the weekend. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy not mincing words tonight. He delivered an ultimatum to the nation's mass transit systems. Clean up your act or risk losing federal dollars. Duffy was in New Jersey over the weekend, where he launched his harshest comments yet on the state of New York City's subway, putting the blame on New York Governor Kathy Hochul for crime and homelessness in the system. A spokesperson for the mass transit nonprofit Riders Alliance says if Duffy is serious about cleaning up the city's subways, he needs to take more of a constructive approach, helping to invest and engage people, not divide them. Last month, Duffy rescinded federal approval for the city's congestion pricing plan, a toll on drivers meant to encourage more people to use the subway. Governor Hochul filed a lawsuit in response, and the toll remains in place, at least for now. Well, tread very carefully. That's the message from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi to Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett for her remarks online about Doge's Elon Musk. In that video shared on Sean Hannity's personal page, Crockett talked about her upcoming birthday and said, quote, "All I want to see happen on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down." Crockett's under fire remarks came during a nationwide call with the Tesla takedown movement, a self-described peaceful protest platform calling for Tesla owners to sell their vehicles and people to sell off their stock in protest over Elon Musk and his massive cuts made through Doge. Crockett is a Democrat and serves on the Doge Oversight Committee. She later clarified her calls to action are nonviolent, she said, and are about figuratively fighting for democracy. Republicans, on the other hand, have accused Crockett of inciting violence with her rhetoric. And this weekend, Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared on Fox News saying the recent violence we've seen against Tesla owners and dealerships and the vandalism has to come to a stop.
And Maria, now you have this Congresswoman Crockett who is calling for attacks on Elon Musk on her birthday. Let's take him out on my birthday, she says. And yet she turns and says, oh, I'm not calling for violence. Well, she is an elected public official, and so she needs to tread very carefully because nothing will happen to Elon Musk, and we're going to fight to protect all of the Tesla owners throughout this country, and it's this basic safety.
I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is inexcusable. Everyone knows that. We've seen a lot of violence in the last week. You may remember earlier this month, several Teslas were torched by Molotov cocktails in Las Vegas. As the Justice Department's crackdown of this violence does continue, 3 people accused of damaging Teslas and EV charging stations now face up to 20 years in prison for alleged domestic terrorism. And in case you missed it, Friday on The Pulse, we spoke to local psychologist Dr. Rose Moten about the so-called Tesla rage and other ways people may be able to channel their anger on either side of the political aisle that they have with the current political climate. You can find that episode on our website, fox2detroit.com. And a different kind of protest happening overseas in Serbia today. Thousands rallying against a real estate project financed by President Trump's son-in-law. The site in question is the former Serbian army headquarters, which was destroyed in a U.S.-led NATO bombing campaign. That happened back in 1999. It's now slated to be turned into a luxury complex financed by the firm of Jared Kushner. The president's son-in-law says the $500 million project would feature a high-rise hotel, a luxury apartment complex, office spaces, and shops as well. Protesters are calling for an end to the project and say the site's former status of a culturally protected zone should be restored. And finally tonight, bringing things a little closer to home, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan preparing to deliver his final State of the City address as mayor. He'll give the speech tomorrow night at 7 o'clock from inside the new Hudson's building. The mayor will talk about the city's progress, projects that are underway, and upcoming goals. General Motors is expected to move into Hudson's Detroit later this year, making its new headquarters. Detroiters will elect a new mayor this November, since Mayor Mike Duggan is currently running for governor as an independent. By the way, we'll be carrying Mayor Mike Duggan's State of the City live right here on Fox 2 tomorrow evening. And with that, thanks so much for joining us here on The Pulse. Remember, if there's a topic you'd like to see covered, or if you have a fact check that you want to see because you don't know what's on your phone is real or not, just scan the QR code on your screen. Send us an email. And as always, I'll see you back here tomorrow night. I'm Rup Raj. Have a good night, everybody.